T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome to the Varanus podcast on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. How is it going? Oh, there we go. How's it going, Brian?
What's up, Chris? Good to see you, man.
I'm good. I'm no see.
Yeah, things are good, man. Things are good. Happy to be here. Good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah,
it's kind of wild world, man. Things have been wild, but it's good to be back on track. So
yeah. We couldn't have had a worse end to that trip, but we won't talk about that just yet. Let's talk about some of the positives. It was a pretty good trip overall. At the end of the day, it was sucked at the end. So we'll get into that later. As much as you want to talk about.
Feels like such a long time ago already, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
But
so, where do you want to start? How did you find it? What was things that shocked? What was things that shocked you, and what was things that you thought were less shocking, or I don't know if that's the right word, but you know what I mean?
So like there's definitely pros and cons to it all, and I would say one of the most pleasing things that I saw from going out there visiting different islands was to see the amount of coverage of forest on the islands. That was very encouraging. You know, my background from doing, from guiding down in Ecuador for years, and back when I was involved at this biological station in the East Andes in Ecuador, I was down there and was part of this research station, and was spending a lot of time every year for about 7 years in Ecuador. And so when you go somewhere year after year after year, especially down in Latin America where rainforest is kind of disappearing at just a rapid click, it would not be uncommon for me to be at a site, exploring the forest, seeing what's there, coming back years later, and it just literally is gone. And to see what deforestation looks like down in these parts of Latin America from just from my trips down there, it was encouraging to see that there's a lot of habitat, immense amounts of habitat on these areas where each of these different species are. And obviously, for those who don't know, on our trip, we were able to go to Waigo, Latanta, and Salawati. And most of those islands are just, from the parts that we were driving around, which was massive chunks of the island, you didn't really see any areas that were clear cut. Some villages here and there that like had some, where the villages, and they would definitely do some cutting. But I mean, from the scale of what I've seen in Ecuador, I mean, it's like literally you get up onto a ridge and it's just everything is gone. There's no trees. So to be able to see that there's forest down there was one of the things that gave me some hope for the species in the whole, as a whole.
Yeah, you put my mind at rest, to be fair, because I've seen some local logging, like I was explaining to you, and I was like, is this like, to me it looks bad because I'd obviously been there before and seen it not cut down, but we're talking like compared to what you're seeing in Ecuador, you're like, that's just standard, that's just for them to make, houses and homestays and stuff for the village. So that put my mind at rest. I was like, oh sweet, it's not like, it's definitely not industrialized like it obviously is in Latin America.
Right. Yeah, and I think as a whole, I mean, it's like the biggest threat to any species, whatever you want to call it, is total deforestation. Without the habitat, you cannot have a species. As long as you have that habitat that is there, it is going to be very, very difficult for that species to disappear if you have a good area of habitat. Now, that can be, that is determined on like what species we're talking about and how big that area is. But as a whole, to have that habitat there was very encouraging, because you hear a lot of talk about, blue trees becoming listed and that they are endangered, and there's really no scientific evidence to back up with a population density survey. There's one study that, you call it like a study. I mean, it definitely was a study, right? There's people who went out, but I think that from things that I have heard about how that went down, there's room for a lot more.
It's quite short-lived. It wasn't a long period study like what we were discussing, where you could stay on Botanta and just see what was coming through there. Rather, it was sort of have a chat. I mean, they did get some really useful information, but it wasn't like it definitely wasn't a true population study. Well, let's backtrack a little bit. You had quite a bit of a flight to get over here. That sort of took it out of you a little bit from America. Do you want to just discuss what that was like? That was a fair few hours to get over.
Yeah, definitely a long trip. A lot of jumping around from North Carolina to Jersey, and then Jersey to Tokyo, and then Tokyo to Jakarta, and Jakarta into West Papua. So that was quite a bit. By the time I got out by you, I was definitely whooped, as can be expected. And it was a long trip.
Full on. Yeah, I've never been this full on. This trip was the most full on I've done it, because like I said to you, usually I get to Sarong and then just go to a hotel. We were like straight out. So how did you find, like, Sarong's a weird one. That was really weird when I first went there. It's like such an iconic name within the hobby, especially like the green tree python hobby, but even for the Prasinus and stuff. It's pretty mad to be actually being in Sarong itself and then be like, oh, well, there's clearly nothing here, but obviously pretty close that there's got this stuff.
That is not what you expect. And I guess that folds into like one of the things that kind of caught me off guard about Indo, and it was very apparent right when you hit into Sarong, is just that the whole situation with trash out there. It's like there's no infrastructure for handling garbage, and the answer is just burn everything, which was tough to see. I mean, it's you expect it in a city, but when you're out in these remote, pristine areas, I mean, we were in some places that, you just would never expect to see trash, and then you're on this beach that's just like picturesque, beautiful. There's no people in sight. There's no structures in sight, and yet there's trash everywhere. And that was hard for me to kind of digest, in the fact that, like, okay, well, what are we going to do? Like, you take the trash out, and where do you bring it to the city, which they're going to burn it. So we might as well burn it anyway. And coming from, like, at least in America, there's this mentality of like, we don't burn trash, like we recycle. And it was kind of surreal too. Like, I didn't get to talk to you about this, but coming from there, like, that was a really hard thing for me to digest while I was out there. Of like, and even like the locals, you're watching locals that are out in the forest, like near some of these villages, and they're out working, and they're finishing a water bottle and they're chucking it in the woods. And it's a very hard thing for me to see, and like, and it just kind of leaves a desire for there to be some sort of like education, maybe to have that more respect for these beautiful places that they live. But to them, it's like, this is home. This is what I've known forever. And it's
where do we
put it? What was that?
I said, and where do we put it? They're just going to turn around and be like, well, what do you want us to do? We can either burn it or we can chuck it. I mean, I've seen the look on your face when we first got to that spot in Waigeo, which is like so far out of the way. I mean, it's literally nobody goes there. It's a proper local place, and you were just like, what's going on? So I did recognize it, but
the crazy thing is like coming back from that trip and then being here with the hurricane having hit, there was no trash service here. So I literally, like, it was kind of surreal to me that, like, okay, well, guess what? Like, we had a meeting on my street where I live, and we're like, okay, what do we do with trash? And it's like, well, everybody, we have to burn it. And so I was
Yeah.
just like, wow. I like literally just came back from Indo where we were doing this, and now I come back here, and it's like we are in this like situation now where we can't do anything with trash. Nobody's coming to get trash, and it's building up. And it was a very funny thing for me to experience from going from that to this, and then being in this similar situation. There's like a lot of lessons learned from that.
Yeah, it's pretty ironic. That is. Yeah, I mean, they're in the same predicament, aren't they? So, but anyway, moving on from trash, let's talk some lizards. So how did you find? I was pretty shocked when I first went there. Again, from Sarong to Waigo, that boat's pretty good. Do you know what I mean? Going over, so that was pretty cool, and you get to see a bit of. I think you were shattered on the way out. I went upstairs for a smoke, I think, and you get to see Batantra on the way past. So I think you missed that on the way over there. So that's usually pretty special. But yeah, getting to Waigo again, you're in like a pretty built up area. We obviously meet the guy we know over there, and then I think we pretty much got all the supplies and everything, and then headed straight out to Waigo for the Bomai, which I thought was going to be the easiest one of the trip because I found them within like 15 minutes and half an hour. But do you want to just discuss how that went?
Yeah. So the summary is, I think, 4 days in the forest. We didn't end up seeing any until the very final day. And so at that point, yeah, it was just, it was interesting. You know, that part of the trip was kind of like watching how the locals, you know, search for these, because with any species, anywhere you go herping, everything has a search image. You can be in an area that has a strong population of a species, and if you don't know how to look for it or where to look for it, you'll never find it. Or the chances of you finding it are very, very, very slim. So I feel like that part of the trip was kind of like the introduction to how to search for them. And so, yeah, that was very, very interesting. And then, you know, when we ended up finding that one on that last day, that was like a relief, and like, wow, we got it. we were pretty pumped. But yeah, just to see habitat. I mean, that habitat that we walked through, it was like pretty much this riparian zone. So this nice forest that was kind of flat, and then so far off of the river, then it starts to go up in elevation. And yeah, just everything from the forest to the river was real. You know, there was some definitely beautiful areas there, and it was just cool to be there. You know, my whole take on it was, even if we don't find anything, it's all good. Everything's good. It's just being there. And from my perspective,
you didn't have the pressure that I had.
Yeah,
I was like, we need to find one. We need to find one.
The pressure was in, you know, obviously pressure and thoughts are always in our own head. But I mean, I tried to make it very clear of just like, hey, you know, Papua, childhood dream of being there, and every insect and plant and bird and anything else on top is icing on the cake for me. If we get a tree monitor, great. If we don't, no big deal. You know.
Yeah, you were pretty excited on the first trip out. You got to see some pretty cool birds and stuff. Tried to turn me into a birder, which hasn't happened yet, but I did sort of get it. I mean, for anyone that doesn't know how much kit a birder needs to take with them and trek with, I don't know how you did that. That was insane. Did you weigh how much that kit weighed in the end?
No. So I was carrying a lot of gear, mostly just like a big 500 millimeter birding lens on a tripod with my backpack that had multiple other lenses. And you do it to yourself. You could go there and just, you know, bring one lens and a camera and a backpack and be good. But for me, it's like I was just as excited to get photos of birds and certain you know, flowers even as I was a tree monitor. So it was like there was no losing for me on that trip.
No, I was pretty lucky with that, because if you'd taken me there, I just want to see reptiles. So it did take the pressure off a bit, especially at the start, because everything was obviously quite novel for you, like even the insects and the birds and stuff.
Yeah.
Annoyingly, we searched that bit of forest for what, 3 days, was it? Was it 3 days in total? The same bit of forest where I'd actually found them before. And then we did some night herping. The first monarch we found was that. I've got a picture of it here, Brian, which was pretty cool. Did Udi come back with this, didn't he, with the guide when we were in the boat? So this is a little Indicus monitor. I've never actually bothered to take photographs of him. So I was pretty happy how this come out, but that was pretty cool to get that ticked off.
That's a great shot. Yeah, that was beautiful. That was cool. And that was like an example of the local when he had found that, just that, you know, like, yeah, thinking that it was Beaumont, because, you know, you take away that face, it's like, okay, black body with golden speckles.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still, that was cool. So cool to see. And man, that place was just so beautiful, you know. It was so beautiful.
Yeah, it's a very cool little spot down there. Like I said, and then I think we did some nighttime herping with every night there, didn't we? Pretty much. We didn't turn up any pythons. I think we got some Dendrolathus on the first night. Stegnotus, which I've got a picture of it here. But we were there's a similar snake. When you can see the difference, what we actually found some later in the trip is pretty obvious. But just to be the snake there called Micropechus ikehika, which is dangerously venomous. But this one is Stegnotus iridis, I think it is. I found it the other day. So these are really cool. We found quite a few of these in the end, didn't we?
Yeah. So, and for background for you guys, this snake right here, all the locals are like super, super terrified. So the trackers that we were with, and then our boat driver, you know, these guys, like Chris and I are in tents and sleeping in tents, and our guys are like literally putting out a tarp, and they sleep on the tarp, and that's it, nothing covering them. And so I'm like, I liked to be, and I like to be kind of separate from everybody just for sleeping, because when people get up or like this way, I know I'm not bothering people, so I'm always like off from everybody. So I'm like
only by like 2 miles, mate.
Yeah. I'm like separated from Chris and the team, and I'm sleeping back there. And one night, all of a sudden, I just hear screaming, like people going nuts. And like my thought is, I'm like, okay, like did like some bandits come in and are we like getting held up? Like what's like, is there a fight going on? Like I did not know what was going on. So my thought is like, okay, do I just stay in the tent, or like do I get out and start like sprinting back into the forest deeper to get away? And like things had subsided, and I heard kind of Chris talk, and then I stayed in my tent. And the next morning, sure enough, this snake had cruised through the camp and had freaked the guys out. And Chris sorted it out with them, and like, you know, handled it.
In my underwear, I jumped out of the tent and got it away from the guys. Obviously, they're just anything white over there. Like I said, the ikehika, like a white snake, and they're dangerously venomous. So they call these ular putti, which just means white snakes. So anything with any white on, they just think's venomous. And like I said, they were literally sleeping underneath the tarpaulin on the forest floor. And it freaked him out, which, you know, it probably would freak me out as well if I was just on the floor. But yeah, these are pretty cool. We found a few of them. We found some cool frogs, which I didn't bother taking any photos of because I'm not a proper herper like you, Brian. But we saw some cool stuff up that. We sort of searched up a river at night, didn't we? And went off in all different tributaries and found some cool stuff up there. But no pythons, which is sort of rings true for most of the trip, to be fair. But then, so yeah, we searched that same bit of forest that I'd found them in, and we didn't find anything. We were putting in long days as well to find the Beaumont with no sort of luck. I think we discussed with the guys, is there anywhere else? And then tell them what happened. That was just like, I can't believe we've been walking past this habitat. We've just been walking the same bit.
Yeah, so you have these areas, like the area that we were focusing on is an area that they had seen them in the past quite a bit, and Chris had obviously gotten them there, but the forest was kind of degraded where we were walking through. They had done selective logging, and it was cool, but you could tell there weren't a lot of old growth trees as much as there should be. And Yeah, it wasn't until like the last day that they take us into this crazy habitat that was just stunning, like really high quality. And sure enough, that was where we ended up seeing one. So it was like, man, I wish we'd have been going here the past 3 days, but those are just the things you learn, and now we know, for next time.
Yeah, yeah, it's really unique habitat, wasn't it? Because some of it was almost like alpine, what I would call it, like different set of trees with there was all that moss on the ground, which you just wouldn't expect in that sort of habitat.
There was an interesting, almost pine, like type of pine tree that was there, which blew me away. And then it was very different, like little micro habitat, like little areas that you go through that are just totally different. So definitely cool. Yeah.
We did get some. I think we got one, didn't we? Python at the end, Brian. We'll get back to that. So sorry, Lisa. We lucked out a little bit on the pythons. Let's go back. I've got that picture. So we did actually manage to find one. We went up a bit of a hill. One of the guys that went up a bit of a hill, and we heard some shouting. And there's sort of a call that they do over there, which is Satu, which just means one, basically. And that's the call I've been waiting to hear for like 4 days. And then we all sprinted up the hill, and it was pretty exciting from that point. I wish I had I don't know if I got any pictures of the actual habitat. I might get those up in a minute. But this is a killer shot, mate.
Thank you. Yeah.
A beautiful animal. I mean, apart from its tail, it unfortunately had lost a chunk of its tail, but the patterning on that is insane.
Yeah, that was a beautiful. I mean, I don't think we could have found a more beautiful animal. I mean, yeah, she was missing a chunk of her tail, but yeah, the color on her and she was just stunning. I mean, we were freaking out, and that was just what an animal, just a stunner.
Yeah, that was a good one. I think I've got a shot of it, the same animal as well. What's that one there?
Oh wow, yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, that was a good thing about this trip as well, was having somewhere there to help you. It's really hard to photograph stuff with
holy
camera
shit, that thing is sick as fuck right there. What a shot, dude. Who did that shot? Was that you or Bryan, Chris?
That was my one. Yeah, that's the only good shot I did get of it. But I got loads of shots before. But
that looks captured born and bred. That looks, dude. That thing looks mint, bro.
Yeah. Really good condition. Like I said, we both hidden the tail on the shots because it would ruin the image a little bit. But it must have lost like the last quarter of its tail, but obviously it didn't seem to affect it too much.
Well done.
We're trying to work out what had gotten hold of it, hadn't we? I don't know if we actually worked out. Maybe another monitor.
I just had to chime in. That was bad.
Yeah, and that was what a good moment. That was just like, that one was such a relief, because when you go, especially like if you've not found a species before and you're going day in and day out, it's like you start to question, you're like, oh man, like, but then it's the final hour, and then once we got that, it was like, okay, check, like on to the next, let's move out and see what else we get, which was, but what a special place. That river alone. I mean, I would go back there and just get into that river and snorkel. I mean, the freshwater fish in that river were crazy. And it's just like, that had me also like kind of wondering too, like, man, do these things ever like forage in the river? Like, there's so much food in there. Like, or is that just, so much to learn.
That one we found was pretty far away from the river. I'm sure it's probably got a pretty big home range, but all the other ones I'd found in the past, and a lot of the tree monitors is always next to that sort of riparian habitat. So it's all pretty linked. I think they need some sort of fresh water, especially in the dry season. But yeah, it's so unique. I mean, you get indicus down there all the time. You found some jobiensis that I didn't see. I think I'd gone off somewhere else trying to find some bovine. So you got the jobiensis down there. And yeah, like I said, those guys there are really, really helpful as well. They're really good guys that we've got there. So just trying to educate them as well to try and take more people out, especially with that lek. I know it's not a reptile, but going back to that lek, that was pretty incredible for the red bird of paradise, was it?
Yeah, that was stunning.
I mean, they're not trained. They need some training from you, Brian. But do you know what I mean? If you got that them guys trained up of how to actually approach a lek and the rest of it, I mean, we must have seen at least 5, maybe more.
Yeah. Yeah. The birds of paradise that are out there. I mean, that it's just crazy. It's like I had to pinch myself a couple times just knowing that you're walking through a forest that has like birds of paradise and like you know, forget the monitors, just a monitored, like they're the tree monitors, like just to be in a forest that is like has multiple species of monitor lizards is just so cool. Like you're walking by and like, oh, there's a monitor sitting on a tree. It's just like, just to have those as part of the ecosystem is so wild, and it's so different from Latin America, which is where I've spent a majority of my time. It's just like, wow. And yeah, you know, like my mind always like kind of goes towards like, oh, what could be done to like for conservation? How could these animals, like, how could we convert these people to like basically protecting this and creating this ecotourism style conservation? And it's like, man, the birds are where it's at. Like if you have a lek, like a site and like a congregation site where these birds of paradise display, if you have that on your property, that's a gold mine. Birders spend so much money. Like birders spend way more money than herpers. And if I were going to do like, which right now I'm not in the position to like dedicate my time and life to going over and like starting a conservation project, maybe when I retire. But if I were to do that, man, that would be, that is the model globally. If you want to conserve forest, if you want to save a species, boy, if you've got some birds that are in that area that birders want to see, that is an umbrella. Birds are an umbrella for all other species. So tree monitors fall underneath that. And like this village that we went to in Wygo, man, they got birds of paradise all over the property. Like they could have a money machine rolling in that could sustain that, you know, that village, that could curb any further deforestation, or minimize it at least. And then once you have that umbrella formed, you've got these birders coming, spending big money. You get your herpers coming too, who want to come and see and photograph animals. Like it's just, my mind was just churning with that.
I mean, I'm never that bothered about seeing birds, and I wouldn't have bothered getting up that early to go and see him, but I'm glad I did. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure there's other people that are a bit more interested in seeing it. It was spectacular to see a bird of paradise, and they're flying in and the calling and all the rest of it. It's pretty special. So and then you've got, you know, I mean, it's literally the identical habitat where you find the boma as well. It wasn't like a sort of special place.
It's like
I've got a picture of that.
Planet Earth.
That's the sort of river sort of habitat. What was funny, Lisa, and why we mentioned that moss thing is we were literally searching one side of this river where I'd found them before, and it was just pretty regular sort of fallen leaves and sort of what you'd expect there. We actually crossed over the river and went a little bit further in, and that's where we were getting this moss and a bit like you said here. I would expect it at sort of higher altitude, but this was at, you know, sort of sea level. So yeah, it was weird how much the habitat changed just by crossing that river. And I think we'd gone, I don't know, not even that much further deeper in, because you can't really get, as you can see there, you can't actually get a boat up most of it because it's tidal and it's pretty shallow anyway. So,
right. Yeah, man, that's such a special place. What a place.
So
just like,
let me just see if I've got.
Were you able to pinpoint that that species of water dragon that was in the on the waterways there?
No, I can find out. Some sort of hydrosaurus, I would have thought. I'm not an agami guy. I mean, that's
they were so cool. I mean, for you guys listening, is like picture like it's like a little water dragon that can just rip across the water like a basilisk lizard. We had seen two of them zip across the water, and one of them was going across halfway, and a fish just came out and hammered it. Pretty wild to see. But yeah, this is a good habitat shot right here.
Yeah, so that's literally where we found that boma, like not the actual tree, but sort of the general area. So pretty thick, loads of fallen leaves. So that's what I've been saying to people for quite a while now. Having fallen leaves or dead leaves in the viv's probably a good idea where you can do it, because pretty much all the habitat was that. And yeah, sort of thick vegetation. Again, we found it in a small tree, which I find a lot of them in. They definitely use the bigger trees, but I guess it's just easier to spot them on the smaller trees for sure. I think maybe they're just coming down to hunt for insects and stuff in those smaller sort of shrubs.
Yeah, it's interesting also herping for an animal that has such good, vision. When you've got something that can see so well, it's like, yeah, it makes it trickier.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
they see you before you see them for sure.
Yeah. Let's get back to Dave there. No, they're a bit of a sore subject. We'll get back to that later, Dave. But no, we didn't get any green trees, unfortunately. So from there, like I said, we tick that Bomai off, and then I think I discussed with you. I was like, do you want to find some more of them, or do you want to get onto some, different habitat and different species? I think because of how far away we were from anywhere, we had to split it anyway, and then we ended up going to sort of Wygo town itself, the main sort of city there, and staying there for a night. We did do some herping there. I think that's when we got the bent toad. I think I got a picture of it.
Another cool thing to make note for everybody, y'all know those emerald tree skinks. I mean, those are like downtown on the trees. It's probably one of the most common herps of the trip. It's cool to be seeing them all the time. I mean, that's like literally you're in the town walking down the sidewalk and they're on the trees. So that was a cool little species to see.
Well, you found that Indicus. Remember we were having this was literally before when we'd literally arrived. We'd probably been in Wygo an hour, and we were having some food before we actually got serious. And you were like, went running over, I think, to look at the tree, and you were like, Chris. I was like, oh, it's going to be a emerald skink, which I've seen 100 of. They're still very, very cool. But you like some monitor. I was like, it all changed then when he said it was a monitor. I run over and it was that little Indicus. But like you said, it's literally that was in the town on like an avenue of trees right next to a road, which I would never have expected them to be there.
Yeah, I think it seems like these monitors, just also too from like where you've been finding them, they're very I'd say adaptable to secondary forest stuff that's kind of regrowing. Pretty adaptable animals, and as long as they've got that food base and some shelter, I think they can make it happen.
Yeah, I've got that a picture of that habitat we actually found the Macrae in, which I'll get to in a bit. But this probably wasn't from the same night. We found a fair few of these. I still haven't managed to ID. It's either Jaipuriensis, isn't it, or the new species, but I can't work out which. I know the ones that I'm familiar with, like the Irian-Giensis. Oh, that's it. Sorry, Irian-Giensis.
I don't know if that's a different species because it's on Wygo.
Yeah, they did find some, but I tried to look yesterday just because I knew we were coming on here, and the pictures, it's very hard to get it to sort of see the difference in them. So I don't know if it is that one or this is just the one you find everywhere. But yeah, these are extremely cool. Massive gecko, aren't they? They're like a proper gecko.
Yeah, that is a huge gecko. It's like damn near the size of a lychee, except much thinner and not as heavily bodied, obviously. But that's a very big gecko right there.
Yeah, huge. And we found it just literally, I think maybe even on that tree, maybe a bigger one, but literally just off the ground. So they must be pretty ambush predator with just its head down, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think we got like 4 of them total, maybe.
Yeah.
And every one of them was all head down on the trees, pointing down towards the forest floor. Some were a little up higher, but usually like, a meter down is kind of where we were seeing them, it seemed like.
Yeah. But very cool. I can't think we found anything of note that night. Maybe Ikehika, the black form that you get on Wygo, which is quite interesting that they're scared of the white snakes, where on Wygo they're actually black, the Ikehika there. I think it's travelled over from Sarong and Salawati where they are white, and we did see one later in the trip. Unfortunately, they'd actually killed it. But and then we must have headed to Batanta after the Wygo bit was done. So we headed over to that. We got pretty lucky with the sea conditions. We thought the seas were going to. Well, I especially thought the seas were going to be pretty bad, and they can be super rough, and it can all sort of turn on its head pretty quickly, traveling between the islands. Quite interesting, I think, is from Wygo you can actually see Batanta. It's quite far away, nothing like Salawati and Batanta, but that's quite interesting to be able to sit on Wygo and actually look at Batanta. I don't know how you found that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was wild. It's crazy, just this, like, yeah, the radiation of these different species on these little islands that are so close to each other. Yet, yeah, they've kind of been separated long enough for there to be some evolutionary changes to create these different species. But it was wild to see how close they are.
The size of Batanta, did that shock you? It shocked me, considering what we get told. I mean, it's not a massive island by any stretch of the imagination, but you do sort of sail past it for a fair while.
Yeah, it was encouraging again, you know, like with what you hear on like status of them, and then like what had been collected historically for them. It was nice to see the size of the island and to actually see that in person, and again to see how much habitat is there and like how inaccessible a lot of the habitat seems. So like a lot of it, with a lot of these islands, from Salawati to Wygo to Batanta, it's almost like you've got the ocean and then that interface where you go then into forest, which is flat, and then it kind of seems to just go up. So you do have some like pretty rugged terrain and like mountains that kind of go up, not tall mountains by any means, but stuff that would be very, very difficult to trek on. And, you know, the more difficult the terrain is, the harder it is to explore, and potentially for things to be, you know, exploited out of there, whether it's forest or animals of any kind. So that was cool to see. But yeah, Batanta was definitely bigger than what I had expected. And, you know,
I think people think it's like a little desert island. Do you know what I mean? They think it's like that thing gets coined around all the time with that one tsunami is going to wipe it out, and it's just not. No. Once you've been there, you can see it. There's that central sort of mountain range, and it's a big enough island to deal with a natural disaster. And I'm sure it has in the past as well. So I don't know why that's getting thrown around.
It has to have been hit by natural disasters, hurricanes, like those. That happens. But again, it's like, you've got these animals that are good swimmers and capable of, you know, surviving. They're not getting wiped out by a hurricane. That's for sure.
Yeah. So that was pretty positive. We went to obviously Amdui, which is sort of the mecca of blue tree monitors, basically for the trade. It's where I've spoke about it at length in the past, but that's sort of where, unfortunately, or really unfortunately, I guess, is where the guys have to make a living from catching the blue tree monitors. But aside from that, like I said, we've been going over there. I've been going over there, and we've got sort of gained the trust of the guys over there now, and they're happy to take us out. So we got to go to a pretty cool spot that sort of not many people have got to go to, haven't they? Which was quite close to Amdui. We did the usual spot quite close to it, and I don't think we found anything. And then I was sort of winding one of the guys up saying, well, this is what's going on, guys. You're collecting too many of them, and there's none left. And I think he wanted to prove a point. So he actually took us to his family's plot of land. So do you want to, that was pretty incredible to go there. I'd never been there before. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it was interesting kind of entering in. I mean, so right when we got there, we had gone out locally kind of behind the village and searched pretty late in the day, which also kind of seems like our time frame was, you know, starting at about 8:30 to maybe 1 is starting to stretch it. But it was like within that window, you've got peak activity times. And, you know, we had kind of arrived at like, I don't know, 3:30 or 4. And we tried going out just because we were there. And I think the guys were excited.
Well, I was literally said to you, I said, oh, we'll have to like stay here the night or something, that we won't go hunting today. And then they discussed with me about, were you ready to go? And I was like, guys, we know we're not going to find anything. I think they were just super excited to get out there. And that's what is nice about going to there over and over. I mean, I think you're speaking to them online now. I speak to the guys there pretty much every other day and sort of practice English with them, but they're excited to get these guests over and take them out, which is the start, I think, of something sort of positive over there for that ecotourism. And they just need a bit of help getting it going, really. But yeah, if the message, the whole trip we were telling them pretty much, you need to stop collecting so many of these lizards, basically. You need to start protecting stuff. But like I said, we did learn some pretty important information that I'd actually never known previous, which was the sassy. Do you want to discuss that, or do you want me to go into it?
Yeah, I mean, for the little bit that I know, this is just
Yeah.
from what, a short conversation with them, which, they had mentioned to us, was basically, from my understanding, from our understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, it was that this sassy is like a no-go zone, a no collecting zone, basically an area that they leave, where they don't enter into, nobody goes there and hunts for anything. And so that was like, oh, wow, that's cool that this exists, because like this village in Amdui, again, it's like the primary form of income for these people is collecting reptiles. And, from my understanding, from what you had mentioned, is that this is the only village on the island that does any sort of collecting, which is also a very good thing. Because then we would be in a bigger issue if everybody was doing it all over the island, but you have this one small village. Granted, these guys are very skilled at what they do. It's good that not everybody was doing it. So then we have this area that, they're only doing this so many times a year, from when they're actually going out and collecting. And so, obviously with an island of what Batanta is, and the amount of habitat that is there, it's just, while the collecting is not good, I would be happy if another blue tree never came out of Batanta. I think that would be great, especially given how many are in captivity and the fact that people are producing the living daylights out of them now. I think after seeing that island, seeing the amount of habitat that is there and the circumstances, and now knowing about these sassies, that it seemed like, correct me if I'm wrong, was it the southern portion of the island that was facing Salawati?
Yeah. So the interesting thing, you'd expect, it's quite, I don't want to call it tribal because it's not really tribal anymore, but certain areas, the people in that village, so certain villages make up the rules for their area. So it's quite interesting to me. What I had in my head before and previous trips was, if they're from Batanta, they're allowed to go to any part of Batanta and collect whatever they want. But what we sort of learned from them was, no, we're from Amdui. The next village has put a sassy on us going to there. So it was quite close. And it was that whole southern region. And they sort of drew us a map, and they go to sort of halfway around the north. And then, like I said, just around Amdui. So there's a big whole half of it they're not collecting on, and they're not allowed to collect on. And then also, interestingly, they're not allowed to go to Salawati and collect the green tree monitors, because they've got the guys in Salawati have got their own sassy, and it's not right for other people from other villages, let alone, other islands, to come and collect their resources. I think quite interestingly, we found out they were actually looking for someone that had hunted a wild boar on their land. And they were sort of gunning for him because he was from another village. So that was quite interesting to learn about that. It just doesn't mean they can just go and sort of take everything.
Right. And it was interesting too to hear our one of our trackers mention that, this is his private land, which we went out there, and this was like, okay, our first day on prime territory within a good window. We ended up seeing two of them, one of which was spotted after we had gone back, and he had mentioned that he had seen. But he's like, if anybody comes on my land and hunts, I'll kill him. It's like, there is protection for these animals it was not recorded or mentioned, documented for this whole ESA push, that is not common knowledge. And that's, it's good that there is, again, this is great. We want protection for these animals, especially for us, for me, who's producing these in captivity and, putting out my captive bred offspring. I care about these animals. You care about these animals. We want protection for these animals. It would be a tragedy for anything to happen where a species was to disappear. But again, there's certain factors that fall into place for something to disappear. There's a lot of factors that have to fall into place. And I just think that we are not in a position right now where that is going to happen. And seeing this, information come to light about these sassies, and the fact that these villages are certain villages don't allow any hunting on their lands, that creates refuge for these animals where
Yeah.
populations will serve as like a bolstering area for population, which then obviously animals spread and radiate out of that zone. So
Yeah.
there's just not enough information that's out there, and it was very, very cool, very interesting to go to Batanta and see this instead of just like this dramatization that is painted of like, oh my God, these are disappearing. This is that. It's like based off of what? Based off of a push from a group who is pushing to have these listed on the ESA with insufficient information. Run some more population density surveys, show me numbers. Then, I mean, if that's the case, I'll get behind it. But until there's like that sound data that's there, it's kind of just speculation. Okay, how many numbers have come out of the wild in the past 10 years? We have a set number. That number looks to be large, but what is the population? How do we know that that's not a drop in the bucket compared to what's actually there? We don't know that. And until we get that information, you can't come to conclusions and jump to things and just knee-jerk reaction. Like
it's totally biased. I think it's a really easy one for them to push as well. And then all of this, I mean, there's a few of us that have been over there now to actually go look for this stuff, and none of that's really been taken. Everyone's going like second hand, and a lot of second guessing, and things are getting sort of passed down from papers or people that have been there and haven't been successful. The Del Canto paper that was been around for ages that I used to read, front to back all the time. He didn't do very well over there, so he could have easily said, they're super rare. But then I go there and find a lot of them, and Eddie's been there and he's found a hell of a lot of them as well. So it's sort of it's supporting the other side of the argument. We need both sides. There needs to be a proper study done. It can't just be this knee-jerk reaction to, oh, it's a tiny island, which again, these people that are saying this have never been there. It's not a tiny island. I mean, it's a small island, but it's bigger than people think. Do you know what I mean? When I first was thinking of going there, I thought it was going to be a tiny island, like really small. But I mean, it's a difficult one. They just need to do a proper study on it. And then a bit like I said to you before is, what do they do if they're not collecting those lizards? It's looking at another resource, and the next best resource for them is cutting the forest down. So it's like it needs sustainable collecting, I think, put in place with a bit of education. And like I said, they've got that local protection now, and they've got some natural protection, like you were saying, with the actual habitat where they literally physically can't walk into the middle of those mountains. And I'm sure that you get macrae there.
Again, I think it boils down to like converting them. It's like weaning them off it. From my time down in Ecuador, some of the best guides that I would go out with down in the Amazon, and again, these are guides who are now working at like lodges where they take people out every day. They show them anything, right? They're spotting tapir. They're spotting, oh, you want to see this rare bird? Okay. Like, you go out with these guides and you talk to them. They're like, oh yeah, I used to be a hunter. Like, I used to like go out. That's all I did. I would just go out and hunt animals. And then they got converted. Essentially, you wean them off of that into ecotourism, where it's like they're simply just spotting. Like, okay, boom, like you've got your guide. They're taking a group of people out. He's up there with a spotting scope. He sets it up. Everybody's like, what do you see? What do you see? And you look through this freaking scope, and they're looking at a blue tree monitor. That can happen. Like, that to me is like the best thing that could be done, is weaning them off of that hunting aspect and mindset to showing them while leaving them there and teaching them that this resource is going to bring them so much more money than if they were to be collecting. And that to me is just the thing. And kind of like what you mentioned with that paper, if I were to have gone to Batanta and gone out just looking for blue tree monitors and then wrote a paper on it, you would think that they're extinct. Like, you have to go out with the right people. And if you go out with these trackers, like you go out with a team of these trackers, you want to do a population study, hire the whole damn village and cover a certain hectare, however many hectares, and do that study in different parts of the island. See what you come up with. That's how it should be done. Like, I know there was that study done in the past, but like, we need more information. We need to do that. We need to get people who are so damn good at finding them. Because again, if you don't know where to find them and you go there looking for them, Indonesian officials go out there with a biologist and they're just looking for them, you could spend a week out there and not see one.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
and it's gaining the trust with them and all the rest of it. Like I said, I don't mind, and I'm just on the same page as probably everyone that keeps them. You would hope that we don't want to see them disappear from the wild. We definitely don't want that. But we just want this argument to be fair from both sides. So provide the data on both sides and then work out the best plan. And unfortunately, it's very one-sided. But we've ranted on enough about that, Brian, because we'll get ourselves in trouble, mate. So going back to that spot was really cool. That one of the guys wanted to prove me wrong because we hadn't found one that day, and I was giving him some jip. So I think the next morning we got up pretty early, slept in Amdui overnight with our guys there. Got up early, and then that spot was probably one of the best I've actually seen in Batanta. And I've done a fair bit of Batanta now. I've been to the north, but that going through that mangrove habitat on the way in, it was like a big lake, and all that forest there looked pretty good, didn't it?
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was cool habitat. Interesting to be somewhere that is like monitor dominated, and to also then like transition to a place where there's potential for croc monitors. That was just wild. Like, yeah, it's a special place. And like when we finally got to see that blue tree, like I was. He started it, right when I had crept up, I saw this thing just kind of cruising up the tree and just so nonchalant, like just flicking and just like, just a special moment. I mean, it's, I mean, when I go back there, that's like kind of like what I was mentioning a lot. Like I really look forward to that sort of interaction, just to kind of be there, be a fly on the wall and like see what's going on and to see that. It was just so cool. It was a special moment for me. And, see blue trees in the wild was just, it was amazing. They're just very, very special animals.
Yeah. So again, after searching through pretty prime habitat for them for probably 3 or 4 hours, this is where we actually ended up finding one, which is pretty typical for where, a bit like you were saying earlier, this disturbed habitat. And we'd actually walk past this, and you were like, in Latin America, this is where we'd find stuff. This nice opening in the forest is providing a different sort of habitat, and especially for the monitors being able to bask in this. I mean, it was way hotter there than it was in sort of underneath the canopy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these tree fall gaps are definitely, they're great, because if you look, that tree that's down, you're going to have any fresh cut trees in the rainforest. You're going to have these longhorn beetles that get attracted to that. They bore into it. They lay their eggs in there. Larvae develop. So you get just like a lot of insect activity in these areas. And again, as you just highlighted, that provides like a very easy basking site. So if you look at the right side of that photo, you can see how dark it is, in that forest. Imagine if you're a monitor, like, you're essentially going to have to get supercharged in a light gap where you've got some sunlight coming through, or they're going to have to work their way up towards the canopy to basically warm up enough where they've got that heat reserve and energy to then go down and forage and look for stuff. And it's just, I've always had success in these tree fall gaps because of that light, and you've got a lot of insects. And there's, it's just a little disturbed area. And sure enough, man, that's where that blue was.
So to not get people worried, this wasn't like some industrial logging or anything. This was literally the guy that we'd gone out there with. This is his section of forest, and he'd sort of felled a very small area just to make sort of, get timber for his homestay or his house or whatever. So yeah, don't expect that it's all going to get cut down. It's sort of this, that's my biggest worry, is they're doing this sort of logging, which when I first saw it, it was, alluding to what we said earlier, I thought this was pretty serious. But then what you've seen in Latin America when this industrial logging can come through you were like, yeah, this is nothing, Chris. So that was pretty positive for me, for you to say that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've got a picture of the actual tree we found it in. There we go. So that one on the right there, I don't know how well people can see that. It's not the greatest shot, but like I said, it had that one whole side was literally full sunlight, wasn't it? And then it could jump across. I wasn't there when you actually seen that one. It was going up this tree here, wasn't it, Brian?
Yeah, I believe. I mean, I can't honestly, like, from my from this perspective, it's hard for me to tell, but yes, that looks right.
Yeah, I think it was this one here. You were facing it that way, and it was climbing up this one, and then it jumped across into the denser stuff, and then actually jumped back into that sort of. It was almost like a dead tree, almost, wasn't it? It was sort of had a lot of vines and stuff on it.
Yeah, kind of made his way up to the top, and then just got comfortable. He's like, "All right, I'm good." It's like,
yeah,
their mentality is just like once they're up, it's like, yeah, they're fine in their mind.
That's the shot I got. I mean, I've got hundreds of shots of McRae, so I wasn't that bothered. But I did want to get one with the tree in the background to sort of, you know, be a bit quirky or whatever. So
yeah,
that's pretty good. Did you get? You haven't looked at photos much.
Pardon me?
Did you manage to get any good shots of the McRae?
Yeah, I've got a good shot. I'll try working on it here and send it over to you in a second, so you can see it. But the interesting thing about this animal, you guys, this was, you know, you might have seen Chris post something on it, or you might have seen a couple. Maybe you've seen some. I know I've produced a baby that came from 2 total solid blue animals, came out, hatched out, typical blue tree. And I had a customer who reached out to me and asked me, he's like, "Bryan, like, look at this. Does this look right to you? Like, is this okay?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And I look at the photo, and this animal has a ton of green on its back. And this male blue tree that we got was a greenback variety as well. It's like this interesting little variation that you can get. And it was pretty wild that the only one that we saw, granted, we didn't spend days here. It was like, boom, we saw one. Okay, let's keep moving. But this animal had really, really cool green markings on its dorsal that really made it interesting. It was just like a solid, big, really good-looking male. I loved this animal. That was a great shot.
Yeah. Interestingly, a lot of them have that greenback. I think I've seen probably a 50-50 split.
Really?
I think I've got a theory that the first ones that come out were from Iam Island, which is that island directly across from Amdui, and that's the one that they did deplete quite heavily. I think they're no longer collecting there now, so hopefully that's sort of bouncing back. But I think all those animals that come from there, and I can't remember ever seeing a greenbacked one. So I'm wondering if the blue ones come from there, then you get a sort of mix on the mainland. And again, Eddie did mention, I think all the ones he saw on his last trip had that greenback. So it's pretty interesting. But yeah, I think I've seen like a 50-50 split of like proper blue tree monitors and then this greenback variety. And like I said, that's pretty interesting. Now it's popping up in captivity. I think we've had a few here, and then you've had that. I mean, that one you had was probably the greenest one I've seen. That was pretty mad.
And the interesting thing about the one that, and I'll send you, I'm going to send you a photo of that one. Yeah. The interesting thing about that is that, you know, the baby that I produced, it came out, it had 0 green on its back. And it was just like you look at it and it's just like, okay, that's a cool, you know, blue tree. And it wasn't until it was like, I don't know, a year and a half old that all of a sudden these green scales started popping up. And again, if you look at the parents, they're just like typical blue trees. They have 0 green on them. And the fact that that came out, it's just pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, even at the farm on the ones outside, it's not like it's like a UV thing or anything, because we've got like a mix of them here. I think we've actually got more of the just typical blue ones than we have the green ones. We have got a few of the green ones. So it's not like you can say it's like, oh, it's lacking in UV or something and it's turned it green, because like I said, these ones have got full UV and everything, and they're doing this green. So it's almost like it's a natural variation.
Right. Yeah. Something weird is going on with that, but that's, yeah, very cool. I was stoked to get it because I've only seen the one from that friend customer of mine, the couple that you posted, and then I know Brandon Van Asten has one that has it as well. But it's definitely not like a majority, nor at least here from what you see in captivity from productions or even stuff that has been brought in the past, you don't see them. Like, it's not a common thing. So for here, at least.
Yeah.
Very interesting. But anyway, I'm gonna get this.
Did you see that? Yeah. Did you see that fully green one the other day, Bryan, or not?
No. Did you post it?
Yeah. No, I didn't post it. It's an Indonesian guy that's got it over here. and I'm pretty sure it's pure. Like everyone's saying it's a hybrid. I'm going to call some shit now, but I know the guy and I know where he would have got it from. And I'm 99.9% sure that it's actually a pure one, but it's fully green. It looks like it's Prasinus green all over. It's not like a green back with blue arms. It's like completely green, but the pattern, the head and everything is pure McRae. So
I'd love to see that. Yeah, if you have a photo, please send that to me. And I just emailed you the photo of that baby that is now older.
Right, if you just talk for a second, I just need to bring my emails up, mate.
Yeah, that's cool. So this is just a guy in Indo who has it, you're saying?
Yeah, he's just a broker in Indo. I mean, it got chucked about on the groups a fair bit, and everyone was saying it's a hybrid.
That's my fear. Is like, well, I mean, whatever, it is what it is. I don't really care. But now, especially after seeing him in the wild, is like I could see. And this was a question that my friend had, who has this animal. He's like, hey, is there something wrong with this animal, or like? It's not a hybrid, is it? Or you didn't like cross anything? I'm like, I'll show you the parents. Like, the parents are textbook blues, and there's nothing in it. And so I could see how people would see that and think that. It also makes. Go ahead.
Sorry, Brian. Sorry to cut you off, mate. Let me just add this one. This is the one that you'd bred.
Yeah, if you can zoom in on that at all. And the dorsal right there. Yeah, so like look at the green coming in on that, which is pretty darn cool. I was like, man, I want that animal back. But
let me just speak for a sec, bro. I'll try and find this other one if I can do it quickly, mate.
To be honest, seeing this also makes me like kind of understand too how, when you're standing on Salawati looking over at Batanta and like, I could see how these things could like, could go green real quick, theoretically, like with some isolation and selective breeding or whatever. Like I could see how these things split off and kind of diverged. And blue to green is a very common thing that you see crossover in colors anyway. Like if you look at chondros, like green tree pythons, right? You've got these like blue morphs. So it's definitely a pretty interesting thing to see. And I don't know, let your mind go wherever with it. But
well, I've got it. Just just talk for a little bit more, mate, because I can't do two things at once, as you know from our trip.
No, you're good. You're good. That is cool. I'd be curious too if like anybody else out there, whether through breeding or just in collections, has any of these green-backed animals. Because I mean, I'm gonna see if I can pull out. Do the greens and blues share similar habitat? Yes, Timothy. They're not on the same island, so they don't share the exact same habitat. But if you were to look at a comparison of what the habitat is where the greens are and what the habitat is where the blues are, there's definitely a lot of similarity. They seem to like, they're tolerant of secondary growth forest, but primary forest, secondary growth forest, usually along these riparian zones, is where you'll get that. Okay, I think I've seen this.
Yeah. So I'm 99.9% sure that's actually a pure McRae. I mean, I stand to be corrected, but
really.
Yeah.
What makes you say that?
Where it's come from, which I can't go into too much detail, but you can read between the lines. And then I've seen 3 of them now, exactly the same as this. So it's not the first one I've seen. And this guy and where he would get them from wouldn't be able to hybridize them, if that makes sense. They can't. I don't want to go too much into it, but that's why I think it's a pure one. And I've seen 3 now, exactly the same as that. And if you look at the pattern on it, it's like 100%. I mean, he's done a pretty good job there. If I pause it there, it's like identical. It's not like it's got a Prasinus pattern. It's like identical, but just green.
Right. Wow.
And I think if it was, I think if it was a cross, it would have had a bit more resemblance to the Prasinus as well, apart from just the color.
Mm-hmm.
And the head, I don't know if you can get a picture of the head. The head's pretty, I don't know if you can see it on this one. No, it's all from the back. The head is literally looks like a McRae compared to like a Prasinus has got a different sort of head to a McRae. That's my 2 cents on it. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's really green.
Interesting.
It could be. I told him to send it to me, and then I'd read it and try and prove it out, see if it was just some sort of morph. I mean, I think what you were alluding to then, green and blue, I think only one thing needs to turn off, doesn't it? And then you'd get completely green anyway. So that, again, that's why I don't think that's such a rare thing to happen. I think it's actually rarer to breed a green with a blue to get that, rather than just one gene being switched off and then it can't produce that blue pigment.
Mm-hmm. So. That was another thing that kind of went through my mind. Just as far as like we were in Sarong kind of having a drink at the end of the trip, and you were talking about a local population of green tree pythons where animals historically that had been confiscated by the government had seemed to like take any animals that were confiscated and had put them in like this one section of forest. And so now when you go to that forest, there's all these different localities and varieties of green tree python, and it's like they're kind of creating this like hybridization zone. And I would hope that would not be the case with any tree monitors, that if the government had maybe confiscated and then decided to release, that you would hope that there would be some serious care placed into that, as well as like I think you had mentioned you had talked to somebody who was on Missoula who like got approached by somebody who had a blue there or something, and it's like, hey, you really don't want to see the different species being on any other islands where they're not supposed to be, because then you do have that risk. And we do know that these things can interbreed, so it's a scary thing to me. Yeah, that area where they're releasing the green pythons, there's no way that they'd come back out. But it is a clusterfuck of what are you doing? I mean, they're just releasing them. From what I know, I don't know 100%. From what I was told, they're just getting any confiscations and releasing it in a protected area near Sarong. But they're not caring about what it is. The biggest worry with that is, I think somebody told me there were some biak animals, which are obviously a different species now to the poultry animals that would be from around Sarong. And they got released at the same time, which is just, that's just a mess. But yes, they just need educating, I guess. I mean, they just call everything viridis still, same as CITES, everything is still just viridis. So do you know what I mean? They're just like, well, it's the same snake, but we are obviously being geeks and into the hobby a bit more, know a bit more about it now, and sort of they've been split up. So right. Yeah. But yeah, that's why I don't want to take people there. A lot of people want to go for green trees. I was like, well, I know this spot, and there's meant to be a lot of them there, but it's not really like a good spot, is it? It's like, I guess it's a bit like going to Florida and seeing the Burmese. It's cool. I was just going to say that. It's like going to the Everglades. Yeah. Oh, you want to go see veiled chameleons? Forget Africa. We're going to go over here to Florida. Yeah. Probably easier as well. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about that, Lisa. That's scary if that's true. Yeah, they shouldn't be on Papa at all, should they? Not good. Well, so we quickly then I guess we got to see the blue. Again, I asked you, do you want to see more? And you were like, no, that's one done. We just wanted to I think we both wanted to get the green, didn't we? Because I hadn't seen the green tree monarch at all, and I wasn't so sure. I knew we could get blues. I knew we could find I thought it'd be easier, but I knew we can get Bomai, but the greens was the uncertainty, and that was sort of new for both of us. So that was pretty cool. And very close to Batanta. Yeah, it was uncertain, it was exciting, and it's very interesting, like going to, Wygo, obviously that spot you had carved out, Batanta, we had the local knowledge of the team. And then Salawati was exciting because it was like we went there, and not only did we not know like about the greens, but it was also like we didn't know where we could actually get in to like look for them. And the whole process of like getting permission from villages to be able to see like
Yeah.
So if we can get in was so cool. That to me was like one of the coolest parts of the trip was like, you know, the relations part of it. Going there with the translator, gaining permission, seeking knowledge, like, have you seen this? You know,
Yeah.
that was really
So-
wild to me. That was
So
fun.
backtracking from that, we'd actually gone. We've gone from Batanta, obviously, to head into Salawati. I didn't want to go back to the same place I'd been before because I was completely fruitless there, even though it was a pretty good area from what I thought. And then we went to that tiny little, I don't even know if you call it a town. It was like maybe 5 homes, wasn't it? And it looked like all they did was fish. And then I was like, oh God. And behind it was super steep, wasn't it? I think we all jumped off the boat there and did the usual, you know, going up to them. And they were just like, no, not a chance. I was like, oh no, this isn't what we wanted to hear. Usually that's like, even if they're lying, they'd go, yeah. But these guys were like, nah, never seen them. Don't know what you're on about. Maybe tried the next village on. And that's the next village we went to, which we got a pretty warm welcome, like you were saying. And like I said, there's a lot of politics that go into it. You were complaining about my smoking the whole trip. Do you want to explain how that worked?
That was the worst part of it. I'm a non-smoker. Chris is a smoker. So I was battling that the whole time, as my non-smokers out there will sympathize with. So, and everybody in Indonesia smokes cigarettes. So I was just constantly like trying to like dodge where smoke was coming. But it was a funny thing when you're in a country where most people smoke. It was an eye-opener, as well as like the trade, the barter system of like, you know, immediately when we get into areas, Chris is just handing out smokes to everybody, and that gets you in some good graces. So I was like, okay, like that was a new thing I learned. So if, next time I'm back down there for sure, it's like, you understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like an interesting system. So, but yeah, it's just cool. It's like there's a whole approach. It's like it's almost like a courting, you know, like a dating type thing. Where like, you know, you show up to this place where you're a stranger and like nobody knows you and like the suspect of you, and like you're showing yourself and you're like,
and we're white, we're bule as they call it. So
yeah, and like literally this place that we went in Salawati, it was like, you know, I am no celebrity, but now I know what it feels like to be a celebrity, because we went to this town and it was like people are like sneakily taking photos of you. They're like kind of walking past you, like behind you and stopping, and someone else is taking a photo. And finally I was just like, do you guys want a photo? Like, come here. And then they're like, yeah. And then like you're surrounded by people and they're all like taking photo, like, look at this white guy. So that was pretty wild. To just in that town especially, is like the younger generations of kids I don't think had seen a white person. Obviously the older folks had, but that was pretty wild. It was a wild experience, and to be watched. Like we set up camp on like the beach of this town, and there was
whoa, Brian. One of us set up a tent on the beach. Someone else had a bright idea.
Yeah, one of us set up a tent on the beach, and then the other set up a tent out on the pier, and that was Chris. No, I was kidding, that was me. But ultimately, like being in this spot, you know, you had like there was constantly people watching it. It's like I felt like I was in a zoo. Like I was just getting up in the morning and walking and hanging up my clothes, and then going through my photos, eating food, and like constantly there's just someone sitting there just like watching you, like so interested in the most mundane things. But yeah, anyway, I foolishly set up my tent on the pier there, and was surrounded by fishermen the next morning. And then my tent almost, you know, even though I latched it down, the guy said my tent almost blew away in a storm, so I believe him. And so I had to move it in. But don't get me on putting tents in dangerous places, because I, you know, remember WIGO.
Yeah. I did something. Well, yeah. Mine nearly got flooded. I just had to keep moving it back. Lucky I was there. Unfortunately, when your tent like went awry, we were actually out hunting, looking for stuff. But interesting with Salawati compared to, well, it's pretty much anywhere apart from Amdui. is that they weren't into collecting the stuff. I mean, they might catch the odd. I mean, the Salvadori, they said they got quite a bit of money for, so they might catch the odd one, but they're not doing it as like any sort of industry there. And then we got pretty lucky with knowing the guide. I mean, he was a bit of a pain. He didn't like dogs, which rubbed me and Bryan. I mean, especially you, Bryan, because you're a real dog guy. My mum would have killed him completely because she's just like you. Unfortunately, yeah, he wasn't into dogs, was he? But he was pretty good as a guide, which sometimes you got to take the heart, you know, got to take the positives and the negatives. I think you educated him a little bit by not throwing stones at dogs.
I don't know about that. Okay. It's interesting, you know, the mentality in general with animals in some places is it's tough when it's tough to digest, but everybody lives differently. And yeah, the dogs in that town, boy, they were rough, like skin and bones and just not treated well. It's like, why have them if you're gonna, you know? But anyway,
I think they're just strays, aren't they? I think obviously someone started with one that was probably a pet, and then they've bred and bred and bred. Unfortunately, some like even the guide we were with, he was petrified. Both of them were absolutely petrified of dogs. And on a previous trip I'd gone on, he'd actually been chased by one. So I think that's why they're a bit more standoffish, because they're not pet dogs. They're sort of stray dogs. But anyway, apart from that, he was a fairly good guide, and he did show us some good areas. I can't remember. Did we get one on the first day at Prasinus?
I believe so.
We did. We went straight out and got one. So that habitat was really good for me because I was pretty tired by that point. I wasn't lugging as much as you around, but that was nice and flat, which is different to where else I'd been in Salawati, which was pretty hilly. So it was nice. We literally walked behind the village, didn't we? It was quite a trek, maybe a couple of kilometers. Maybe I don't know what that is in miles. A mile, maybe a mile and a half to get good habitat.
I think so.
And there was a nice sort of river again. Salawati is pretty good for that, for having these sort of nice rivers actually in the forest, which you don't seem to see so much in Batanta as you do in Salawati. But yeah, that was really cool. Being able to just walk literally from the village. I think the guys were happy as well because we could just let you go. I mean, from the start, because you're sort of like you know, you're a guide. That took the pressure off all of us as well, where you could be, you know, you weren't going to get lost. So like our guide was saying, you know, is he going to be right? And I was like, yeah, it'll be fine. And that was a nice, easy one because you could literally walk down the trails and then come back. But yeah, we walked all the way down there, and then we split up, didn't you? And you stayed with the guys. I went off with your mate and tried to look for stuff. And then we heard a load of shouting. It's a shame you haven't got that picture of that keelback thing you found, because I don't have any photos of that.
Yeah, I mean, I will get on those photos slowly but surely, but it's obviously
it'd be interesting to know what that even was. So anyway, we've done the walk down to find these green tree monitors with the team. We ended up splitting up. I heard a big commotion and a lot of shouting, and for some coincidence, you guys had actually found a green tree monitor at the same time as some locals had found this keelback snake, which was in its own right like stunning. I've never seen one over there. It was almost like bright red, wasn't it? With like
it's like bicolored, like red and green, like different parts of the body, and yellow. It was real pretty.
So I was also surprised that they'd actually caught this thing, because everyone's usually petrified. They must know that one's not venomous. Do you know what I mean? For them to hand it over was pretty crazy.
That was interesting. A species that, like, I mean, whatever. Not that we are like the all knowledgeable know-it-alls, but I feel like you and I, between the two of us, we've got a pretty good understanding of like herpetofauna, and to have a species that we've never seen, and then for these locals to, like, obviously having seen it and to have the confidence to hold it was like kind of impressive, and very impressive, because most places that I've gone and traveled, whether it's Africa or all over Latin America, boy, if it's a snake, they don't touch it. No. And for these guys, they walked up confidently. They're like, here you go. And it was like unharmed. It was flawless. It was like, cool.
Yeah. So I quickly realized, because you guys were carried on shouting, that literally probably, I don't know, 100 foot up or something like that you guys were with this Prasinus. So I ran over to you and was like, look what I found. And you were like, well, look what I found. Or look what we found. So that was pretty special to get to tick one of those. I mean, the relief for me was like, oh my God, because I obviously hadn't seen one. I'd done a failed trip and I had not found one. That was pretty special. But you can probably say a bit more about, you know, how it was found.
Yeah, the interesting thing again about this, granted, we were like pretty far into the forest, but this area that we were in was definitely like logged. Again, it was another disturbed area that had been logged. It was not like pristine rainforest right there in that spot. They had done selective logging. But so long as like, yeah, again, like so long as you have trees and a canopy that's kind of touching, this one was on a larger tree, or had moved onto a larger tree. Yeah, it was just kind of cruising up. And then once again, like once they get up that tree, like there's an initial like thing where they kind of feel a little threatened, but then once they get up there, it's like, okay, they just chill, and then they like splay out and just kind of relax. They're just like looking around, like they don't really care when they get up there. But it was really cool to spend some time with that animal and just kind of watch it and see what it was doing. And yeah, just and really a good feeling of success too, and like knowing like, man, we did it. Like we had a goal for this trip and we met the goal. We were able to see all three, and then right then and there it was like, and we got more time. Like we got more time on this trip, so it's like, hey, this is good. This is good. Life is good.
Yeah, that was a good one. Pretty interesting to actually see one from Salawati. Like I've said to you in the past, from what I know, the ones that we see in the hobby, they've come from sort of Manokwari. They call them sarong, but more likely they're actually from Salawati. But we did see a bit of variance. I mean, this is the first one we found. Make that full screen. I'll go back to there. Pretty interesting. I mean, you were arguing with me that it looked like a Merauke at one point, but I don't know if you're winding me up.
Like, but you can't, like, yeah, the cool thing about this first one is it had like those ocelli, which was really cool to see. And that's what I was like, oh man, if you took this animal and spread it all over the internet, like from the dorsal down, people would, you know, they would say, oh, that's a Merauke. And it's like, that's just the mentality, because you don't really see that ocelli that much. So that was really cool to see on that animal. The others didn't have it as much as that one, but yeah, that was such a cool moment and such a beautiful, beautiful lizard.
Yeah, even the green on it is pretty light. It's a really nice animal. I mean,
super neon.
Yeah. And well behaved, which was always nice. And so yeah, we let that one go, and then I think we did some night herping that night. So on the same night, and we hadn't found anything of any merit. And you spotted, let me see where it is, this guy, which was pretty hopeful. I'd only seen one before on Batanta, but this is a Candoya carinata. And you just stumbled across it. I think, did you find this one? And then straight after we found another snake, and I was like, oh my God, we're on to finding loads of stuff.
Yeah, and so that was the first night we got in, because we arrived pretty late, and it wasn't until the next day that we went out looking for greens. So this might have been like the actual first herp we got in Salawati.
Okay.
And then it was the next morning that we went out looking for Prasinus.
Right, okay. Yeah.
This was like a great little first herp. We got this thing. We're like, oh yeah. So that was cool to see. Cool. And it was right there. And this also, like, this is not in the forest. This is in a banana plantation. Like they had cacao and banana. And this village did a lot of farming. And so yeah, a lot of herps in the plantation where the food was.
Yeah. It was pretty snaky in Salawati. I mean, we didn't find any pythons, unfortunately, there at that time. I can't believe we didn't find any green tree pythons there, but it was super snaky. It was probably one of the most snaky areas. We were both saying to each other, like, the amount of species we're finding each night, unfortunately not pythons, but like, and how many we were finding, it's like on par with what I've done in Australia, probably even better for actually walking around. I do a lot of road cruising and stuff in Australia, and you know, you're covering loads of miles, but we were finding loads of weird, you know, like different sorts of those stegnota stuff again we couldn't even ID. So
yeah, that was probably the most productive place I've ever been, thinking about it, like for snakes at night. I mean, I think we were averaging like 5 snakes a night, you know,
Yeah.
if not more. It was very, very productive nighttime herping, which was cool. Lots of good stuff.
Yeah. Oh, this is another one we got on the first night.
Thank you for getting all these photos tackled, by the way. Cool to
No, you're good.
definitely.
So this is one we found in like a little hut, didn't we? On that same night. This is gecko vittatus, isn't it? What you'd call a skunk gecko or a line gecko. And these are like really common, or they were really common in the trade. I don't know. I haven't seen many around so much now. I don't know why people don't do more with them. They're awesome.
Yeah, my there's some people breeding those too now, which is cool. My friends, the Gilpins, breed those, and that was a cool one to see. It's always cool when you see an animal that you've like seen in the trade for a long time since you were like a kid, and then you actually get to see them in the wild. Like I had, that's always really special. It's like seeing a bearded dragon in the wild. It's like, whoa, cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they're a cool species. Yeah, very, very cool. After that, obviously, we must have gone to bed. Let's just go back to one of Lisa's questions, because this was what made the guides actually the most happy with you, was do the guides hunt fish and fish for you? And yes, they do. Basically, I don't eat fish at all. So me and Raja Ampat is like the worst ever, because all the islands, that's their main source of protein is fish. But you were pretty happy. Going back to the Tanta, you got to try that. I wish I had a picture of it. That giant eel that they found there.
Yeah, that was wild. Like one of our guides just was like, he's like, "You guys want eel?" We're like, "What? What are you talking about?" And he just like goes off and disappears with like this like pole spear, and just like, I don't know, 25 minutes later he shows up with like a freaking 6 foot long freshwater eel.
Huge.
And like I'm like, what? And it was really amazing. Like just the use of like how they, you know, I was like curious on what he was going to do to cook it. And he like took this eel and essentially like chunked it, and took bamboo and took chunks of that eel and stuffed it down into the hollow of the bamboo, and took like some, you know, special herbs that he packed in from his garden, and took some leaves and packed on top, and just stuck the bamboo in the fire. And it was amazing. It was delicious. It was like really, really good fish. So
Yeah.
But yeah, they definitely would. I mean, yeah, they were hunting fish in some of the spots. I think it wasn't until like we got out to Batanta when that started. And yeah, like the people in Salawati were fishing every day, and there's just like schools of these like sardines that were all over, and you know, just eating those sardines, like they were fried up. They're amazing. So
yeah, definitely. So yeah, lots of fish.
You're live, Hash. Take your car insurance elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't know what that's all about. Yeah, so they, and again, going back to Lisa's comment, some of them chew that beetle nut. Me and Bryan got pretty close to trying it, but it fucks their teeth up something bad, doesn't it? They're all got really stained red teeth. You kept talking about it, which was pretty funny. Obviously, it's pretty new to you.
Yeah, I'd seen it forever from just knowing about Papua, but I was like, yeah, it'd be cool to try. And then once you start, like, I think it clicked for me once I started seeing how jacked up everybody's teeth were. I'm like, you know, I think I'm good.
Yeah, definitely.
And it literally, like, the acidity like destroys your teeth. Like literally have like little pegs for teeth. I'm just like,
yeah,
I like my teeth. I'm gonna keep them.
Yeah, they couldn't even explain what like it even really did. It was like it's kind of like a cigarette, but not really. You just get addicted to it. I was like, not really up for that one. But yeah, a lot of them do, Lisa. It's again, it's a pretty good bartering tool, or well, I wouldn't say bartering tool, but like to get friendly with the locals. Oftentimes, I buy beetle nut and cigarettes, and offer them out, and then you sort of get them on a level playing field with you. So the next day, we must have found another one. I think we found 3 total. Was it 4?
I think we photographed 3 total, but there was more that were spotted. So a lot, like with all these spots too. I mean, there's situations where when you see some of the animals, like you know, the guides see them like quickly passing, and then we weren't able to see them after the fact. So, yeah, I think there was probably, you know, as far as photographed, 3, and then probably like 6 that were spotted. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you missed out on seeing the second one. This one was pretty cool. So basically, we're walking the same sort of trail every day, which you basically get to a sort of a dead end, and there was a load of logs that were fallen down. And one of the guides, we were literally sitting there. We've been down to this point every day, and then we literally seen, well, he seen one on a tree. I think I've got another picture of it in a minute where you'll see where we were sitting, literally right by where we were. So it couldn't have been any easier. And then the interesting thing with this one was it was actually eating Katie did, which I've got a picture of. I'll get that on it. So here's those logs where we'd sort of go to the end of this trail and it comes to a dead end. We'd sit down here pretty much every day, and then we'd end up walking back through the jungle to sort of find stuff. And we were pretty lucky on that day that this was the actual exact tree that it was on. So that's how close we were to seeing it. None of us, there were probably 5 of us there, and only one of the guides, you know, spotted it on the tree. And like I said, it was eating a katydid, which is not, like you were saying, Brian, it's not unheard of, but it was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, it was a massive katydid, very soft-bodied. Because some of the katydids that we were seeing a lot of katydids over there, and some of them have like almost the carapace, which is right behind the head of the katydid. Some is like can be very heavily armored with spikes. I still think they would on this and just like kind of grab the parts and use their hand to kind of tear off what they don't need. But this katydid here was completely soft-bodied. And the thing that blew me away about this observation was like, man, like katydids during the day are sedentary, right? They're kind of like sleeping during the day. They're not really moving. Like during the day is when they're hanging out, acting like a leaf. Nighttime, when you go out night hiking, that's when you see katydids that are moving and active and feeding. So to me, like, while we've seen in like studies, like gut content studies, that katydids are like a primary food source, it really drove home like, how the hell, like they must have a really interesting like scent that these monitors can just pick up, because like, man, that has got to be such a hard. Katydids are very difficult to find during the day just because they're sitting on that branch like a leaf. And the fact that this monitor is just sitting there plowing it down at like, you know, early morning was just like, wow, that was a cool thing to have stumbled across.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was blown away. I've never found. I've seen maybe one that rising gray hunting skinks, but to actually be able to get it and, you know, it after catching it, it sort of chucking it out of its mouth and actually being able to see it was pretty special. Like I said, so we can say that they definitely eat those at least.
Oh yeah, that was so cool. That was so cool, man. Yeah, when I heard the screaming on that one, I literally was in the woods with my pants down. You know,
I didn't want to say.
I'm like, are you kidding me right now? I'm like, ah! So I like finished up and got over there. But yeah, what a cool thing to come across, man. Wow.
Yeah, interesting. Like you said, those other ones that we were spotting had like that spike thing on the back of there.
Yeah.
But you don't think it's just ripped that off?
I'd have to look back at the photos because I thought when I was manipulating the katydid to look at it, I thought I remembered this one not that being a different species, but I think I have pictures of the big guy and maybe can cross-reference and see if that is a similar species. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if they popped a katydid, knowing tree monitors. I mean, you know, and anybody who keeps tree monitors, like when they bite a prey item, if it's a large prey item or if it's something like, they'll take their claws and they're just shredding it apart. So, I mean, that would be a very easy thing for them to just pop off, I feel like.
Yeah, that's what I thought just looking at that there. It looks literally exactly where that, you know, that thorny bit would be. And like I said, they'd easily eviscerate that and get that off, I would think. It was huge. It was huge, wasn't it? I mean, that other picture showed it, but yeah, I mean, the size of it literally swallowed that as that is there. It swallowed it whole.
The size of a credit card, like straight down the mouth.
Yeah. I think that's the only ones I've got of that. So The other one we found was that we photographed. Like I said, I think that we were finding on average, or they were seeing on average 2 or 3 a day that we weren't getting hold of. But we moved to another spot. We tried to go to that island, didn't we? Which was, I can't remember the name of it now.
That's okay. It's probably for
Anyway,
the best.
Yeah, probably for the best. The island in between Salawati and Batanta, which I thought we might be able to turn something up cool there, because that's literally smack in the middle. Be quite interesting to see what was there. We didn't get anything there, but on the way back, we went to another pretty cool spot, and that's where we got our scrub python. So do you want to go into that?
Yeah, it was kind of like another situation of like what you had mentioned about having that keel back and shouting going on. It was like I was with, obviously during the forest, during the day, we're all spreading out. Like the more spread out, the more people you have, the better your chances of finding things. And yeah, like I had just caught this unidentified species of snake and was like hollering out like snake, and then like off in the distance I hear one of our guides hollering out, like going nuts, screaming out snake, and I'm like, okay, yeah, like wait, what? And so it's like multiple people are screaming out snake, and like finally like it just wouldn't stop, and then finally it had stopped, and I think that's when you had gotten over to him, and and then finally like I worked my way over to him, and then at that point I'm like, oh, snake, big snake. And I'm like sitting there like holding this little snake in my hand, and I'm looking at that, I'm like, wow. Like it was just a cool multi-species moment. And for those of you who haven't seen the size of this scrub python, I had gotten to the riverbank, and Chris had already gotten a hold of it, and it was just a really cool thing to see. Anytime you see a giant snake, it's just like, it's just a cool thing to see, that animals can get that big.
I was a bit closer to it than you were. Obviously, you were with that other snake. But yeah, one of our guides, I'd seen him in the river. He was walking the river while we were actually walking the jungle. And he was literally running towards the snake, shouting "Ula," which just means snake, and then running back. And then he didn't know what to do with himself. Obviously, he knew we'd love to see it. And then luckily, I managed to jump down. And I was not expecting to see one so big, let alone it was literally cruising just like that, fully submerged in the water, and sort of going into the side of the bank on there, which I managed to grab it out. And then, like I said, you turned up, but just an amazing snake to see fully submerged, and probably 15 foot, Brian, we approximated that. Unfortunately,
bigger. I mean, it was a massive animal. I mean, it was just a massive animal. It was a giant, just like multiple people long, it's just a massive snake, and just a specimen, and a puppy dog. And to see it too in the river like that, it was pretty wild, like just enjoying, and like, took our photos, and after kind of watching it go, after the photos, it just swam off in the river. And I'll tell you what, it's very impressive. You think like, oh man, it'd be difficult to miss like a snake of that size. You think it'd be an easy thing to see, and boy, you'd be surprised. That thing got in the water, and it was like, wait, where did it go? And it disappeared. And we're talking like a snake that's over 15 feet long. Easy.
Yeah. I think we're being pretty what's the word? Underestimating the size of it of 15
conservative. Yeah, conservative.
Yeah, definitely. I have got one of you taking a picture in the river, which I think this is probably one of the best shots of the whole bit. I don't know if you've seen this shot.
You got to give me that photo.
Yeah, I'll send it over. I don't know if you'd seen it or not, but that gives you an idea of the size of it. And that was literally where it was found. Do you know what I mean? I grabbed it, and then you were like, I want a picture of it right where it is, and you managed to get some shots of it. I mean, just incredible.
It was insane, man. What an animal. That was like, that was a highlight. That was like a special moment. It's like one of those moments you never forget. And Yeah, just
Yeah, I've seen like small ones in the past, which are definitely as they're cool. But just to see one that size, and that's an old animal. Do you know what I mean?
oh
To live that long in that habitat, when you've got Salvadori knocking around, you've got cassowaries there, you've got all sorts of stuff that can possibly eat you, and to be able to get that big and last till now is really special.
yeah,
and like I said, such a good temperament.
yeah, and you can't see it, but like I've got a 120-pound dog. That snake could have eaten my dog.
Oh yeah,
easily. It was easily. The head was like, I mean, that thing could have put its mouth over my head if it wanted to. I mean, it was just a beautiful giant, a beautiful, gentle giant. But yeah, the thing, it's kind of cool too. When I was like looking at it, I was like thinking, like, man, what has this thing eaten out here? Like, probably hammering cockatoos and like possums and who knows what else. Cuscus.
Wild boar. They got boar there, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe even deer, but yeah, anything you can get. I mean, it's so big, you can get tree kangaroos, everything, I would imagine. So it's definitely doing well. It was really good condition, wasn't it? I mean, you can see there, it's just like
and a couple little stars on it, but you're not getting that old without some stars.
No. Yeah. So that made the trip. Like I said, that was the first python, and we were like really excited then to see more pythons. I'd given up looking at night, but you pretty much smashed Salawati every single night and didn't manage to turn up any green tree pythons, unfortunately. You did find some Boiga and stuff like that. Again, I haven't got any photos. Found some Irregularis, Boiga Irregularis. Lots of weird Stegnotus-y type things that, like I said, I still haven't been able to ID yet. We did get we didn't. An Ikehika got bought through the village, which was a real gut-wrenching one. That they'd found a really massive, like classic looking Ikehika, but unfortunately they'd killed it. Trying to think of anything else. I really wish I had that stick insect. That was another one, was an amazing find, but I haven't got the pictures on here. If you go to my Instagram, you'll see, I think there's a picture of me or Bryan with this stick insect, and it was absolutely a giant.
Yeah, that thing was humongous. That was cool.
So on the way back, I think we're heading back to Batanta at that point. He took us to another spot, which, I mean, that spot I reckon would have. We've been looking in chocolate trees, hadn't we, for green tree pythons? These chocolate trees were very low to the ground. I'm sure we would have found them in that bit, because these were like some really tall chocolate trees, and there must have been loads of rats and stuff. So it's a bit of a shame we didn't get to search that at night, but we'll have to go back. But we did actually manage to find on the way back. Let me find the picture. Another Prasinus. So that took us up to, that was the third one, was it? Go there. This is literally in situ, basically a pretty crappy shot. But yeah, it's not far off the ground, maybe a meter off the ground. You can see it. That's it there. Yeah. The sort of viney habitat. I don't know what you were doing at that point. You'd missed out on this one as well, hadn't you?
Yeah, I got there, and it was just up a little bit higher at that point. When it was at that height, I did not see it. Right when I had gotten there, I was just behind it, like just on the trail previous. And when I had gotten there, it was higher up and was kind of sitting up in that stuff, and then disappeared at that point.
Yeah, the funny thing with this is me and two other people had walked straight past it, and this is why, I mean, like we were saying earlier, if you haven't got one of those trackers with you, you walk past nearly every single one. He walked past and literally shouted, like, "What are you doing?" Basically, there's one right there, and unfortunately, there was a bit of commotion there, and it started sort of heading up a bit. But yeah, I consider myself to have good eyesight and to be a pretty good herper, and I walk straight past it, so they just blend in so well to their surroundings.
And it's like, for those of you out there who are herpers, like tree monitors, to me, like the biggest takeaway that I had from this is like herping for tree monitors is birding. If anybody's a birder out there, like the way to be successful with it is going super, super slow and just like taking your time on each step and like really being observant. Because it's not like, I've been out with some herpers and they just like, they're going constantly until boom, they stumble across something or like they spook something up. And it's like, yeah, that can happen. But man, like the really good trackers with these, like they're taking 2 steps and then they're standing there for a minute. And then they take like 10 steps and then they stand there for a minute. It's like, it's just super slow creeping. you know?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it feels like you're on a walk. I've done it with people that are not as skilled as those guys, and you're like, there's no way we're going to find any tree monitors. It's like we're just going on a hike and we might see one where, especially that young lad that we know over there, he's like a master. Like I said, you spent quite a bit of time with him. I've spent a lot of time with him in the past. You know, he'll take 2 steps, get a cigarette out and, you know, smoke and have a look round, and then maybe take another 2 steps and look around. He really observes the environment, and he's literally the most successful one there, I think. He turns up a lot of stuff.
Yeah, this was the prettiest one out of the group, in my opinion. This one had like a lot of the classic blue going down its back that, you know, people associate with a sarong. Lots of just beautiful dusting of blue all down its back. I've got a photo. I don't know if you can pull mine off from that one or if I should send it to you, but kind of shows
the
dorsal.
shots. Yeah, show the dorsal way better than mine. Mine are sort of
trying to see. Oh no, it's on Instagram. Anyway. But that was the most beautiful one. That thing was so stunning. Just a beauty.
Yeah, really nice, really well behaved. And yeah,
you can see the blue there. Yeah. Say that again.
Say again.
There you go. Yeah, look at that blue. Like that thing. Oh, that was just a specimen. That was so cool. And it was very interesting that the last 2 that we photographed, you know, we think of like, it was very cool, like to see them lower, you know. Both of those animals were like chest high, head down, from those last 2. And so it was cool to see that versus the others that were all like higher up. So obviously, like, you know, they're coming down, they're foraging wherever there's the food. And gosh, and the other interesting thing is the 3 that we had photographed were all males. So that was pretty wild.
Yeah, it's definitely a bigger bias for males just anywhere on all the trips I've done. You turn up way more males than you do females. I think they're probably walking around a bit more, maybe looking for females or just a bit more brazen than the females are. So yeah, that is interesting. We didn't find any male Prasinus then. Everything was male.
Except
apart
for the
from
bowline. The bowline was a real pretty little girl, but everybody else.
And that's our guy. That's a pretty good photo. He was pretty chuffed. That's the guy who found it.
Yeah.
He's super young, isn't he? I can't remember how old he is, but he's so young. But he's got such a good talent. We just need to make it, you know, point him in the right direction. But he loves us coming over. I've met him. You know, I've gone out with him a fair few times, and they get excited, which is nice. So that wraps up. I mean, that was pretty much mission success. At that point, that was the 3 species of tree monitor found, and multiple, which I would have been happy with 1 of them green tree monitors, but to see, you know, 3 of them and to get to see how varied they were, you know, in just one area. That was one little bit of the island. It showed how pretty variable those guys were. So from there, we dropped the guys back at Batanta, and then we headed to back to Waigo, on the hope of finding some green tree pythons, but we didn't. Unfortunately, you got a bit of bad news. I don't know how much you want to go into it, Bryan. People probably know that follow you. I mean, I just didn't even know what to do because it's like literally the worst thing that could happen on a herping trip. So you couldn't have been any further away from home, and then, you know, all of us with animals, it's like disaster. So yeah, that was hard, and especially hard for you, obviously, not even able to get older people.
Yeah. So for those who don't know or weren't aware, basically like 5 days prior to leaving the trip, there was I had caught wind of a hurricane that hit, and that was Hurricane Helene, and that just was probably, I don't know, one of the scariest bits of news that you could ever get. You know, I had one of my employees who had reached out to me and kind of told me that, you know, hey, storm hit here, it's really bad, I can't get up, you know, to the collection, I can't like get to the facility and take care of stuff. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, my mentality is like, get up there. Like, what do you mean you can't get to it? Like, go. And then, like, you know, so I was like kind of upset, like, man, like nobody's like, why aren't they up there? But I had my friend who was living, you know, nearby and able to, like, who's up near the where the facility is, and so she was taking care of things. Luckily, she was there, but then I had a neighbor who had contacted me, I think when I was out trying to go scuba diving one day after, you know, we had kind of gotten back from being in the forest, and she really painted the picture for me what had gone on. And I mean, people, yeah, like a lot of people died in my hometown, like, yeah, over 80 people, a lot of which those people were just 5 minutes down the road from where I live. And, you know, at that point, I had not known that information yet, that people had been killed. And my only information I had was it was bad, and power, and there's not going to be power for a long time. And nobody can get up or leave from where, you know, my facility was or is. And man, when you get that information and you're off on a faraway island and with very limited communication, and I mean, little to no communication. You know, I was just talking with my friend Emily last night. She was able to go and communicate with my other friend, Gabby, who was then relaying information to me. So everything I was getting was secondhand. But my Emily, who was with the facility, was hiking 10.5 miles every single day, 4 days straight, until she was able to find someone on the street who had Starlink. But she was hiking 10.5 miles round trip each day. That's how much it was, to go down to be able to get signal to send out information. And my life turned upside down, and as it is, having lost a lot of eggs, like did not make both monitor and gecko. And I did have some animals that had died. The buildings did flood, not terrible compared to other people. But man, at that time, I just knew how bad it was and was getting pretty scary information. And that ruined the end of the trip for me. You know, it was like you couldn't focus on anything. I canceled going out scuba diving in the number one best place in the world to scuba dive. Like, I just canceled. I didn't even go. I just was like sitting in this little village and like waiting until the next time we would get information, which was either late at night or early in the morning because of the time change. And it was just a very, very scary thing to know that, like, wow, everything has potentially just been taken from me. And at that point, I felt as though it had. And so my mind was racing with this bit of information I had. And a lot of it was very true. Luckily, you know, I had a generator, which I think I could do a podcast segment in the future just on prep for natural disaster with how much I learned from this.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
But man, having a generator helped a lot. But I definitely had a lot of losses. But it's kind of weird for me to talk about, you know, like losing animals and losing plants. Like, I'm hanging in the greenhouse right now, which this place had gotten cooked, burnt to like a crisp, like an oven. A lot of stuff died in here. But man, I got very lucky, and a lot of people who are on my street had their trees on their houses. The road is, I mean, the road is insane. Landslides everywhere. There's a whole tract of forest behind where I live that literally looks like, if you see a before and after photo of a rainforest that's like pristine, and then afterwards it's been clear cut, it's what it looks like. A tornado, like tornadoes ripped through here, and like right where I am in my house, I thought somehow it missed me. And so I did get flooding, and I did have like loss, but it's kind of like, I feel weird talking about like, oh, I lost animals and I lost plants, and like I can talk about monetary value, which is like probably 65 grand in losses, when there's people down the road who like literally are dead and died.
Yeah.
And so in the grand scheme of things, it was a very, very unfortunate way to end the trip. Very scary for me, like rocked my world and made me really, like, you hear people say like everything can be gone in an instant, and you hear that and you think it, and it doesn't register, but it really can. Like, it can all disappear in an instant. And for a lot of these people, like, who live in my community, and my community is still like, I'm good. Like I got my business back on track. And you know, things are good right where I live. Like my place doesn't look the same. My around where I live doesn't look the same, but man, like you go down in the town and it's just like, there's literally houses that are just off in a football field. There's like cars that are in the rivers, like water. Like think about a Home Depot or a Lowe's. You walk into a Lowe's, there's an area nearby where the Lowe's had water up to its ceiling.
It's insane.
Like, think about that. That's crazy. So, like, we literally had this hurricane, like crazy winds and tornadoes, all that hit this place. It was literally a historic event. So, literally, we had a historic catastrophe occur when I was out on this trip, and so that was pretty bummer to see. So, a big bummer to experience, and a very scary thing to experience. And I'm just very grateful that things are okay, and then I had people to support me. And man, I felt so bad for Chris. Like as terrible as I felt terrible for Chris, because I was a miserable person to be around, that's for sure. So yeah, definitely a bummer. So yeah.
For some reason my laptop's not charging, so if I drop out, that's why.
Yeah,
I don't know why I'm doing that. Probably lost power here somewhere. 2 seconds.
Yeah. But anyway, but yeah, as far as photos, guys, I mean, I won't be posting photos kind of to my Sundown page. That's kind of dedicated towards like my business and captive husbandry. But if you guys are on Instagram or Facebook, I do. It's Bryan Suson Photography, and that's where I'll be posting like photos from the trip eventually. I just kind of haven't really been able to focus on it just because life's been turned upside down out here quite a bit.
Yeah.
But, slowly working through photos, slowly.
Yeah. I mean, that's at least I was just felt totally helpless. I mean, like I was trying, like the first 2 days, I was like, I'm just going to leave him alone completely. And then being a man or whatever it is, you try and think of like things to like help. But we were just totally, I mean, I felt so bad for you. I couldn't think of anything worse on a trip than to have that news. And then I was just trying to like think of things that might help. And then, like I said, it was just so difficult. I mean, luckily, I just don't think that could ever happen again, hopefully. It's just super unlucky to be away. I mean, it could happen again, but to be away and it just tying all in together is just such bad luck.
Yeah, I hope it never happens to that magnitude. But yeah, man, the way weather events keep occurring, it's kind of a scary thing. And the fact that can happen, it was the perfect storm to hit here, and just really disrupted lives and businesses. And again, like, they're not even like, we know firsthand just from like what's down the mountain, and like the news wasn't even reporting exactly, not that it really matters, but like the death toll of what happened just in my town was like, not like, for some reason they weren't reporting it. And yeah, it's like there's people who still like don't have any closure as far as like getting to see loved ones, and like, you know, getting to give them like a proper funeral or whatever. It's terrible. It's crazy. So like, again, in the grand scheme of things, I feel so lucky, super blessed. You know, despite, I'll take those losses and the chaos that happened. And man, it's gratitude and grateful for every day. And yeah, it can all disappear in an instant. And wow, you'd never imagine. Like, the thing that really caught me too is the forest. I could never imagine how that could happen to a forest the way that it is. It's nuts. There's like a tree every 100 feet that's up, and every other one is down. 200-year-old trees just gone.
Right. Like, I know, that's when it really hit home for me, when you started showing me the photos of it. I was like, oh right, this is really, really serious.
Yeah.
But it was difficult. Anyway, we can't end the podcast on a negative. So what come from that was we didn't manage to get any green tree pythons. But that being said, now hopefully things get a bit sorted. You're looking forward to going to Papua again on another trip?
Definitely.
What have you got in mind?
Definitely. I got to go back and make it right.
yeah, that's what it feels like.
Definitely a tough way to end it, but man, what a great trip all in all. I just, like, I didn't really give myself time, and this was nice being on here to like give it time and to give it reflection and to think about all the good that did happen and the learning experiences, and getting to hang out with you and learn more about you. And you know, it's a rare situation that you go out and spend that kind of intimate time with somebody, and like not like also too like this is not comfortable. Like for those of you thinking like, oh man, I want to do that trip, like imagine like you're not showering for long periods of time. You're sweating profusely all day while getting bitten by like malaria carrying mosquitoes, and you're dripping sweat. And then when you go to bed at night, you're dripping sweat. So it's like, it's a very uncomfortable situation that you're in. You have to really be like there for the love of it, which both of us are. And again, this being like a childhood dream for me to go to Papua because of like language barriers and like because of all this like the village difference and like gaining permission. Like there's a lot of things that really need to be into play for you to do it correctly. And that was a barrier for me, which, you know, you had facilitated and definitely like made those barriers passable. So very, very grateful for you on that, doing that groundwork to make that possible, because it's probably one of the most difficult places to freely travel around. It's not like, oh, I'm going backpacking in South America for a month and I don't know where I'm going. I'm just going to go. Like, you can't really do that, especially on mainland Papua. Like learning, you know, like Raja Ampat, the islands are definitely a little bit more friendlier towards tourism. Whereas like, you can't go do that in like mainland Papua and like in villages, like you'll get killed. So it's cool to have like,
you can't even turn up to some of the villages we went to, Waigeo, that one far out in Waigeo. I mean, Amdui's pretty good now because I've been over there a few times and other people have been over there. They sort of know what to expect. But those guys in Salawati, when we turned up, they were like, imagine me and you turned up to that village and be like, yeah, we want to see green. They would just been like, what are you on? We would probably just, you know, got ourselves in a lot of trouble. So yeah, I was super lucky having someone like you go with me. I mean, I get messages all the time and I try and help people as much as I can. If I can go out with them or whatever, but it's full on. Do you know what I mean? I try to put a lot of people off, because if you're not really into it, it's not like something you can do pretty casually. It's a pretty full on trip. Like I said, it's uncomfortable. So yeah, it was really nice to have someone like you with me, because like I said before, I'd just done it on my own. I didn't really want to risk anyone else's safety before, and like, you know, you'd done all the guiding and stuff. So yeah, I felt very happy with you there, and we had an awesome time. I mean, it was an amazing trip. So yeah, hopefully we can do some more in the future.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'd gotten kind of sidetracked, but it's rare that you go spend that kind of intense, intimate time with somebody that you really like. Yeah, we had talked, but you don't know. You get to know somebody. It's like, yeah, and then you put people in like uncomfortable, like, you know, you're in an uncomfortable environment, also dealing with someone for the first time. It's like, yeah, it takes the right people, and it was a great trip overall, and I definitely can't wait to get back. And again, it's like, I know, it's a very special place, and you know, it deserves a lot of recognition and protection for sure. And it was a blast, and go back and do it on more normal terms with an unfortunate ending.
Go on.
I was just going to say, it's a rare situation for me to be in a place where I'm about to go out scuba diving in like the most baller place ever, and then also knowing that there's green tree pythons in the forest and me not caring, and me just being like, I don't want to go look for that stuff, because right now I'm like,
that's when I felt the worst. That's when I felt the worst for you. That's when it really hit home. I was like, shit, this is serious now. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it means you got a reason to go back for green tree pythons. Like I said, you need to do Missoula as well for the rising gray. I need to get back there myself. And then, you know, we've got the harder ones to do after that, the Aru and Biak, and then the ones even further out. So there's always a reason to go back, which is nice. But I think we'll start wrapping things up. I don't know if MJ's still here and he wanted to ask anything. I think he's on father duties. If anyone's got anything in the comments you want to ask quickly before we wrap it up, let us know.
Yeah, no, but this was, it was good. And thanks again, man. That was an awesome time. And to see, to see just like your workplace too, where you're at, you know, it's a very unique situation and really cool. Like it's a whole nother thing, and it's good to see you over there doing captive breeding and putting your knowledge to work over there. I think it's a much needed thing. It's something that somebody had to do, and I'm glad that you're doing it, because it's
like a dream for me over here. Like, I pinch myself every morning. And like I said, I become quite blasé with the Raja Ampat stuff. I kept saying to you, didn't I? I was like, it's too easy, just because I've been there so much and I've got such a good sort of, the itinerary planned out and everything. But then thinking back to, I've put a lot of work into to do that. So it was nice to show some of that off and have that trip. So like I said, the farms. I was glad to see the farm as well. It's nice to show that off. Not many people. I mean, literally nobody gets to go to the farm. It's not my farm, so I can't just invite people here. So, do you know what I mean? It was nice to be able to get you permission to come here and show you. And like I said, I think you were pretty impressed with what you saw.
Yeah, it was great. It was like, it's so funny. The thing I keep thinking of is like, it was just like this, just this cool, massive compound. There's like this episode in South Park where Cartman is like with KFC and he goes down to the Colonel's place in Colombia. That's what I felt like. I was like at the Colonel for KFC's like compound, and it's just it was wild, just the amount of like space that's out there, and the projects that are going on. It's cool, man. It's really cool. I was blown away. It just when you get there. Also, I had gotten there like immediately and then went there, so I was super jet lagged. So it's like you kind of see it all and it's like overwhelming. It's kind of like what I tell people too to their first time in like the Amazon. There's so much. You look at everything, it just goes like system overload, and it's like almost like you're getting showered and nothing, you're a sponge and you can only absorb so much, and then the rest just runs off of you and just gets washed away. And that's how I felt at the place there at the farm, because it was like you see so much, and I was so tired too and jet lagged. I couldn't absorb it. And then after we left, I'm like, wait, like I want another day to like actually go through and like absorb it more. But,
I had the same when I first come here. It was like I think a day and a half, and then the first day I just walked around with my mouth open, just the size of it and the amount of stuff we've got here. And then it takes like 2 days to really like, all right, I'm going to go back and see how that's done, and then see how that's done. So that's what I was saying to you. It would have been good if you had like a couple of days at the farm as well. Would have been nice. I was glad you got to see it, which is perfect. But Ev, what's going on with Sundown, mate? Got no questions in the comments or anything about the trip, and MJ's doing father duty. So let's wrap up with some positive what you've actually got going on at Sundown then.
Yeah, so I guess we're on the Varanus vault. We'll talk tree monitors, but a lot of like I kind of had to get things back on track with that. The animals were on completely funky light schedules and only certain times a day. The good news is I just was able to get a third bloodline completely separate from the others of Bomai to get some eggs from her, which was awesome. So that's all, like those are firing away, and other stuff starting to pick up. I actually had some Beccarii that were locked up the other day, so that's great. Just paired up some Prasinus for the first time. I'm finally doing Prasinus. So hopefully, come this next year, we're gonna I should have all species on the ground, and everybody's doing well on that front, and just like revamped the website and threw a bunch of stuff up on there. So things are cooking along. Hopefully there won't be like a big upset as far as like cycles from the geckos and everything going into the new year, because I mean everything was thrown off whack, like lighting, temperatures, it was all like all over the place. So it's interesting to see how that goes, and I've learned a lot of stuff from that with like incubation and what can happen very late in the game with incubation, which is kind of crazy, because you think later on, if stuff is within that final like couple weeks or week of hatching, that like, oh man, they're through the hard times. Like, no, that is like one of the most sensitive and dangerous areas. One thing that I had that was interesting was with a lot of the geckos, for instance, that hatched right after I had gotten back, which I had gotten home about 5 days after the hurricane hit, which this place was like, FEMA had just come up and like carved a road. But a lot of the stuff that was hatching, had hatched. Like I had a number of geckos, like way more than I've ever had in my whole time of doing this. with like organs outside of their body. So they had like a heart that was outside of their body. And just like that was like very interesting to see. Like probably had like 12 animals that had happened to. And then a bowmai clutch that I had that had actually hatched was hatching on the time that they had like, so Emily had transferred my eggs down the mountain to get to another vehicle. Like they took it down in an SUV in this little tiny path on the road that hadn't fallen away. And there was a clutch of bowmai that had hatched, and 2 of those babies came out like really kinky and deformed. And again, like they had gotten exposed to temperatures, like from going from an 85-degree incubation, they had gotten exposed to temps that had gotten down into the 60s, like very consistently. So instead of doing like a straight bake at like 85, all of a sudden now they were going very late in the game. Within this last week of hatching, they had gone from 85, boom, down to 60, and then back up to 85 when the generator was on, and back down to 60. And so they had several days of that. And, you know, the other 3 hatched healthy, doing great, no signs of anything, but 2 of them definitely hatched out like super squiggly and weird. And I would have just called that like an anomaly and brushed it off if it had not been for all of the evidence that I had seen with geckos that not only had like a heart outside of their body, but they also had like a couple of them had some squiggle things. So those were chucked up as some losses too. But all in all, things at Sundown are good. Shameless plug. I've got, you know, it's the Black Friday event out here in America. So
plug it.
Really nice stuff on the website now, and I'm running some cool deals on stuff. But things are good. Grateful to Emily Burke. I'm grateful to everybody on the team who helped kind of save things over here and provide a lot of help and peace of mind to me. So that's, you know, thank you to all those folks. You guys know who you are, and I'm just very grateful for that. And thank you, Chris, for dealing with me in that time, because I know I was a nightmare. If I was you, I wouldn't have wanted to be around me. I'd have been like, bro,
no,
it
wasn't like that at all. No. I felt gutted for you, and it's all also like I couldn't do anything and you couldn't do anything, so I felt helpless for us both. But yeah, mate, it was too easy. Like, you know, we chilled out on the beach at the end of the day. It wasn't like it was a bad time. We weren't falling out or arguing or anything. I just left you alone. I think you needed leaving alone when you first found out, and then we were sort of shooting the shit and trying to think of things that we could think of, which sort of, you know, took the time off. But yeah, I was just gutted for you more than anything. I mean, I'm over there pretty regularly, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, we just need to make it right next time and get you over and get some green tree pythons. For sure.
What a trip though, man. We went out there and like mission accomplished. Yeah, we didn't get a green tree.
I mean, that.
Also, too, for everybody else out there, not only did we see 3 species of tree monitor and find the scrub python of a lifetime, but also got to see, you know, several species of birds of paradise out there. So that was pretty amazing to get to see birds of paradise, and not only just see them, but to get to see them lekking and displaying. So, you know, for those of you who've seen the Attenborough series with Planet Earth, and, you know, it was pretty special. I mean, I'd go back there just to see birds of paradise, and if I didn't see any herps, I'd be fine with that, you know?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, overall, it was a fantastic trip. The monitors were number one anyway, and to do all 3, I didn't even know that was possible to do all 3 in one trip. I mean, that's you know, that's pretty incredible. So yeah, all good. I'm glad it didn't happen at the start of the trip. Can you imagine how bad it would have been if it was the start and you had all that time to go? I would have
gone home. At that point, I would have gone home. At that point,
you'd have to,
the timing for it being at the end of the trip was why, you know, we had to wait it out. And honestly, in a way, it was kind of a blessing to be outside of it, because what I was able to do is kind of play like the chess maker and put pieces in place to you know, having even as limited as my communication was, it was a lot more communication than Emily had on the ground at the facility. So, you know, again, having to hike 10.5 miles each day just to get communication, in a way, it was nice to be able to put the pieces of the puzzle together to get the eggs evacuated. You know, I shipped out, like I was able to get animals sent out to other people's collections. Had a lot of people helping out with that. So it was kind of, as shitty as it was actually a blessing in disguise to be able to be off-site, to be able to make the controls needed to fix things. So
yeah, definitely. Right, I'm going to wrap it up, mate. Thank you for coming on. I'll speak to you after this. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll be back now more regularly every other week. My traveling schedule has slowed down a little bit until the new year. So yeah, thank you very much, and I'm going to close it out.
Thank you,
Excellent.
Chris.
Cheers, Bryan.
Thanks,
Cheers,
everybody.
mate. Bye-bye.
Thanks, MJ.